Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Welcome to DSC's Campfires with Larry Weissoon, a unique blend of hunting, fishing, wildlife conservation, and the outdoor lifestyle. DSC's Campfires is brought to you by DSC, Conservation, Education, and Hunter Advocacy. Hornady, accurate, deadly, dependable. Taurus, award-winning revolvers and pistols. Stealth Vision, high-tech, precision-driven equipment for the modern hunter. Mossberg, American-built, American-strong. Vineyard Max, deer attractants created for the aroma of success, game feeders, and other innovative hunting products. Red 55 Winery, signature wines from the Emmy Award-winning country artist Miranda Lambert, owned by Rick and Beverly Lambert.
With the coming of January and particularly February, got a time to spend a lot of good time out in the woods, but also at like the DSC convention in Atlanta and a few other places as well too. Normally I do a lot of the show circuits, but been trying to cut back a little bit more in the last few years because in Texas we still have in January and February the managed land deer permit, which allows me to hunt on those properties with that permit until the end of February. Great program. Part of the time, though, in February particularly, I have been dealing with a respiratory problem. I think like so many people out there right now that are kind of got started off with the flu and those kind of things, being a hard-headed old guy that thinks you ought to never get sick, and when you do, you ought to be well in about 3 or 4 days. I waited a little long to go to the doctor, and when I did, I finally did go and found out that I was in the beginning stages of pneumonia. And of course, they quickly put me on some antibiotics, and some cough stuff and some all kinds of other things. So I'm starting to crawl out of that hole. I thought today would be a good time to tell you a little bit about the Coues Whitetail deer hunt I did down in Durango, Mexico. For those of you who've been reading my writings and seen some of the shows in the past and all those other kind of things that I've been involved with for a very, very long time, you know that I absolutely love hunting Coues or Coues whitetail, particularly down in Mexico. I've hunted down there several different times, and it always interests me because I'll talk to somebody and talk about Coues deer, and they're very quick to correct me and say it's cows, like C-O-W-Z. Says, remember, the Coues deer was named after Elliot Coues, who was a Army physician back in the 1800s and traveled with Crook and a bunch of the other guys when they were chasing Geronimo, and they found this little whitetail deer that was quite a bit different from the regular whitetail deer in a lot of different ways, pretty much because of their size. There's some things about that particular little subspecies of whitetail deer where they live, and they live mostly in the high country. You occasionally find them down on the foothills and the flats, but for the most part, they live in the higher country in the mountains of Mexico. And one of the very obvious quick things that you notice about them is that they're generally considerably smaller body-wise than the regular whitetail deer. Over the years, I've shot several now, and I've been in on the taking of several others. And the one thing that I've noticed, it'd take a really big Coues or Coues whitetail deer to weigh 120 pounds on the hoof. Most of those that I've taken probably weighed right at about 100 to 105 pounds. And these were mature bucks, talking about bucks that are 4, 5, 6 years old, and in some instances maybe even a little older. Now, the other thing that's very obvious when you see one and he starts running is you look at the tail. Now, a whitetail, regular whitetail, such as those we have in Texas and, oh my gosh, all throughout much of North America, when they run from you and throw their tail up, it is directly straight up. So you can see a huge white tail there, and it's very, very obvious. Now, when a Coues or Coues deer runs, what he does, he lays that tail all the way over the top of his back, so it is literally parallel with the line of his back. So one of the very quick little things you notice when you first start seeing them or start hunting them. The other thing that I've noticed over the years, now I kind of got interested in the Coues deer, which is what I prefer to call them and generally do, when I was a little kid, reading Jack O'Connor. Jack O'Connor called him the Coues deer, or he called him an Arizona whitetail occasionally as well too, because for the most part, that particular subspecies lives in the southern, probably third of Arizona, maybe the 1/4, if that much, of or 1/5 maybe of New Mexico, down in pretty much the southwest corner, kind of pretty much kind of down in the Boot Hill, and that Boot Hill kind of section that juts out back behind Texas and down into Mexico. And then they're found in such Mexican states as Sonora, Chihuahua, maybe a little bit over in Nuevo Leon, and also down into Durango. Now, I'd hunted Coues deer numerous times in Sonora and was very fortunate there a few years ago to take just an absolutely monster buck that grossed 135. He was basically a 10-point with back tines where he had another tine coming off from a mutual base. So from a gross point, he grossed like 135 and some change, which is obviously a big Coues deer. He netted like 127 and some change, and made the all-time record book for the non-typical side of things. Years earlier, my first one was when I shot down in Chihuahua, which kind of borders the eastern side of Sonora, about where those two come together. And that one actually scored in, he was a really nice 8-point, real massive for the little species that they are. And he grossed like 110, 112. Didn't quite make the book, but on the typical side, but still a really, really outstanding one. And then others I've shot have been right there at that 100, which any buck, it's a Coues deer that scores 100 or better is considered a really top-notch animal. That, and then one year I hunted down in Sonora and was able to take a velvet horn. I've not seen very many of those. People call them cactus bucks. Bucks, obviously, this one probably had been castrated as a fawn by one of the Mexican cowboys, and he had like 6 or 7 total points. But I have to tell you that I did get a chance to eat some of the meat from that one, and it was out of this world delicious. As for the most part, the little Coues whitetail tend to be really good to eat. Like I said, they're not real big. One other thing that you'll notice if you start hunting them is that they have a unique ability to hide almost in the wide open. You'll sit there and glass and look and think there's not a deer in the country, and then all of a sudden you'll see a glint of an antler, or maybe the eyes, or wiggle of an ear, or maybe even a shadow of an antler or a profile of that deer if he's laying fairly close to a rock where that shadow is kind of cast upon that particular rock. I've had that happen a few times. But I've also hunted them where I recall one particular big 10-point. With that said, I'll tell you that the vast majority of material Coues whitetails are 8-point bucks. Occasionally you'll find them with more points, but that really is kind of the standard when you get right down to it. This was a 4x4 with brow tine, so 10 points, if you will. Probably would have scored in the 110 to 115. I mean, a really good kind of deer. Chapo, who was my guide, he and I sat on a hillside looking at another one, and we watched this deer walk into a very shallow bowl in an open area, meaning there was hardly any vegetation around this thing, kind of on this hillside. We sat there for a while and made sure he was there. We had another guide with us, and finally Chapo suggested that, so Larry, it doesn't look like this deer is going to come out of there. We better go in and see if we can get close, and maybe you can get a shot at him when he runs. So with the guide watching, Chapo and I headed to where we had seen this little really nice 10-point walk into this little old bowl that really just had very little vegetation in it. Didn't look like there was any way for anything to get out of it without being seen. And we slipped up there, got closer and glassed, got closer and glassed, and finally we were right on the edge of it and looked into this little bowl, which was probably about, maybe 50 feet across in every direction, and there was not a deer there. Now, how that particular 10-point got out of there without us seeing us, I have no earthly idea, but I do know that he did, and to me, it just kind of solidified the fact that very often they're kind of called the gray ghosts of the desert, because they truly are. Knowing that I liked hunting Coues deer, I was visiting with Travis Wright, who owns Heart of Texas Outfitters. I've hunted with Travis several times the last few years for whitetails and a couple of other different things. And I mentioned to him, I said, man, it's been a while since I've had a chance to hunt Coues deer. I said, I'd really like to go on a good Coues deer hunt. And he immediately came back to me and he said, Larry, said, I've got 3 or 4 pretty good operations that I deal with down in Sonora. He said, but I need to tell you about another one. He said, that one's down in Durango. It's called the Durangueno Ranch. He said it's like 57,000 acres, sits down in the mountains, the tail end of the Sierra Madres down into Mexico. And he said the ranch is big, from what I understand. He said, I've not been there yet, but he said, I'd really like to try to put together 2 or 3 guys and see what it looks like. He said, I do know that the owner, Alonzo Ayala, has done a DNA test, and those truly are Coues deer, as opposed to some of the other subspecies they have down in that direction. And he said, before he could say anything more, I said, hey, I'm in. I've always wanted to hunt Durango, hunted a bunch of the different other Mexican states. And to me, that was a really fascinating. I said, man, I am in. And tell me when we're going. And I told him, I said, the only time I can't go in January right now, this back last summer, I said, is during the time frame when I have to be at DSC. But as soon as I get finished with the DSC convention, I said, I'll be open to go and ready to go. So I put my name down, and in the meantime, he contacted a couple of 3 other guys, and I contacted 2 guys with the Dallas Safari Club, Abe Nafa and Andrew Gold, and both those guys were going to go. Unfortunately, as it worked out, there was some health issues in Abe's family, and unfortunately, he couldn't go at the last minute. And so, hopefully, Abe, if you're listening to this, we got to plan this better next year so that you actually get to go with us on this one, and maybe even hunt some of the elk that live on that property, by the way. There's some elk on that huge ranch. It's 57,000 acres. It's some of the most beautiful mountainous type terrain you have ever seen, complete with pine trees in certain areas, pinon, cedar, lots of different varieties of oaks, open grassy hillsides, deep canyons, tremendously beautiful country. And so all this was related to me, and then I started going back and forth a little bit with Alonzo, with who owns the ranch, or he and his family own that ranch, and he started sending me some photographs of some of the Coues deer they'd taken in the past, and they have done very little hunting when you get right down to it on the Coues deer. Now, they do have some of the finest and most Gould's turkeys there are to be found anywhere in Mexico, and they do those kind of hunts. And he told me, so we do a limited amount of elk hunts as well, too. These are free-range elk. And while I was down there, he was telling me, then I'll tell you about it now, that there used to be elk all throughout the Sierra Madres on the lower end, but back in probably in the 1800s and early 1900s, the last of them were killed out. And so he has taken upon himself to procure elk from best as I recall, from like Arizona and New Mexico and maybe Colorado and Wyoming to reintroduce elk into that area. And they now have an absolutely fabulous herd of elk that live on that ranch and the adjoining ranches. And they do a limited amount of hunts each year for some huge bulls. It's not uncommon for their hunters to take bulls that scored 360 or better, and even approaching that 400 limit. They do mostly bow hunts, and then they do a few gun hunts kind of at the tail hunt of the, whatever they set up as a season. So you know a little bit about the ranch, and at this point, man, I couldn't wait to go. So early on, we got in touch with Alonzo, made sure that we had all the proper documentation for rifles to be taken down there, because I was going to go down with my Mossberg Patriot Predator in 6.5 PRC, topped with a 3-18 by 44 SVT stealth vision scope, and of course shooting 143 grain ELDX Hornady Precision Hunter, which after spending time with the guys over on stealth vision, or with stealth vision on their range, and they even developed a custom turret for me set up for this 8,500 to 9,000 feet elevation that would be hunting in once we got down there. So needed to get all that paperwork done, and that included photographs of the rifle, of the serial number, photographs of the scope, the serial number, model and make, and of course the caliber and round, and then also pictures of the ammo that I was going to be taking, along with all this being provided to Alonzo to get all the paperwork done for us and to have it ready for us when we got down there. We did this starting months in advance, and I suggest if you're going to go to Mexico that that's something you do. The one other thing I'm going to suggest is Mexico has got some interesting regulations. It's not a problem bringing a rifle in. You just do it properly, and you do the paperwork early, and you deal with a reputable outfitter, which in this case not only was Alonzo the outfitter down there, he was also the landowner, and because of that, has connections to get the paperwork done properly. Now, while we were there, we had another gentleman that came in to join us, and he brought down a rifle that looked very much like a AR type rifle, even though it was a bolt action, had a extended magazine, and when he dragged that rifle out, it brought all kinds of attention upon himself that he really, I'm sure, did not want to have, to be very open with you. I had told people quite some time ago, and unfortunately I didn't tell him, I said, do not try to take a rifle down that looks anything like a military firearm. In this instance, it was I think a Bergara rifle that he brought down that looked like skeletonized stock, looked very much like an AR frame. And when the people at the Mexican Customs saw this, their first thought was, oh my God, this is a sniper rifle, and there's some bad things going on. And he ended up, thankfully, it didn't get as bad as it could have because of connections from the landowner stepping in and helping. But he ended up spending the day in the interrogation room away from the airport, and unfortunately learned a very valuable lesson. And so here's a reminder: if you decide to go to Mexico, and Mexico got some of the finest hunting there is to be had when it comes to the deer species and even desert bighorn and those kind of things, but do not take down a rifle that looks anything like a military style rifle. Stick with a rifle that's either a really nice bolt action, a single shot, such as the Rugers or some of the others, or one of the lever actions. But the bolt action, they understand, and all those kind of good things you need to know, and need to have a 4457 as well for here in the States from the U.S. Customs Office, and a few other things. But all those can be provided to your outfitter and your landowner to take care of those permits before you go down. The group that ended up going down, is Travis Wright and I went down together, and then unfortunately, as I mentioned, Abe could not go, and Jimmy Henderson stepped in, a friend of the Wright family of Travis and his mom and dad's, and kind of filled in for Abe, who will hopefully go down with us this coming year. The other gentleman was Andrew Gold. Now, Andrew is one of our DSC members as well, too. And then we had two other gentlemen that joined us, Quentin Hermes and Chris Pannell, sorry, Chris, Pannil. Sorry about that pronunciation, but both these guys, as was in the case of Jimmy and Andrew and Travis Wright, had never before hunted a Coues deer. So it was a great adventure for them in so many different ways, and I think by the time the hunt was over with, I think those guys were completely hooked. We got down after to the ranch. They picked us up at the airport. It took about an hour to drive up into the mountains and a little bit longer than that to get to the headquarters. The headquarters were absolutely fabulous in terms of a huge hacienda, individual rooms, individual bathrooms, food that was out this world good, company that was out of this world good as well too. And I'll mention very quickly that so was the hunting when it was all said and done. Tremendous populations there, but all that was good. We got in there the first afternoon, sighted our rifles in just to be sure that they're in. Got to meet our guides. My guide was a gentleman by the name of Zerto. Zerto heads up the wildlife program there on the ranch, and in spite of the fact that I speak very, very little Spanish, and Zerto spoke hardly about the same amount of English that I talk Spanish or speak Spanish, but yet the two of us got along, extremely well during the hunt. Jimmy and Travis hunted together because they were sharing a gun, and then Chris and Quentin were hunting together because they too were sharing a gun. So we had several guides. Each of us went in a different direction the next morning. Hunted hard. The wind was blowing probably 40 miles an hour at those first couple of 3 days, but as it worked out, the very first morning, about mid-morning, Travis and his guide and Jimmy slipped into a canyon, and as soon as they did, there was this absolutely beautiful 8-point standing less than 200 yards away, and Jimmy took him and ended up scoring like 104 or 108. I mean, a very, very respectable Coues deer when you get right down to it, and that worked out pretty well because after that I got to spend a little bit more time and get to know Jimmy Henderson real well, and had an extra set of eyes. As it worked out, I'm going to kind of skip over several things. We saw lots of deer. I saw a lot of bucks, lots of does, a lot of fawns, a lot of elk, some of the most beautiful country I've ever seen, interesting birds, vegetation that was reddish bark. I mean, really kind of beautiful kind of things, rocky country, some of the flats in between, unbelievable mountains. They're javelina in the area too, and as it worked out, and toward the tail end, I was able to get into a herd of javelina as well. But we hunted hard for several days. As it worked out, two of the guys, well, actually, let's go back and talk about Andrew a little bit, because Andrew probably had the same infection in his lungs that I did, and didn't get to hunt after the first morning. He got really feeling bad, and unfortunately spent the rest of the time, except for one afternoon, in his bed. But as it worked out, Quentin and Chris, they were there on a 5-day hunt, and the rest of us were there on a 7-day hunt. And on that fifth afternoon, they were coming back, both of them with their guide, and Travis was with them that afternoon. And they came up on 2 bucks. Earlier a little bit in the day, Quentin shot a really nice 7-point old mature deer, and then just right before dark coming back in, they found another buck that looked pretty good, and Chris was able to get in onto him, and as it worked out, this deer was a non-typical. He had like 8 points on one side, 6 on the other. Also seemed like he was kind of palmate on the main beams. Absolutely beautiful kind of buck. So both those guys tagged out. Jimmy had tagged out. About the next morning, Travis got into a buck, a really nice 8-point that had a lot of width to it and a lot of mass, and it too probably scored about 108. Just an absolutely gorgeous, big, Coues Whitetail deer, and Andrew that same afternoon hunted in an area where we had sat and glassed a bunch of country, shot a really nice older mature 8-point as well. It was probably right at 100. I mean, but just a really pretty kind of deer. So kind of came down to the last day, and that evening before, after having spent a whole bunch of time visiting with the owner, with Alonzo, and that afternoon, or that late that afternoon over supper, that last day with both he and Travis, and they said, Larry, you're the one who hadn't shot a deer yet. I know you've been real picky, and I had been, but I was looking for an older mature deer that had at least 8 points, not passed up a bunch of young, some of them really nice kind of deer, but young, and with me, it's always been about trying to shoot a mature deer on top of everything else. So they decided that we should go to an area where Travis had included. Travis, Zerto, Travis's guide, another Alonzo, and I had decided that we would go where Travis, a couple of days before at a long distance, had glassed a really nice old mature buck. He was too far away to get a shot and then was running and was gone. And he said, let's go there and see if we can find that buck. And who knows what else we might find, kind of thing. And so it was getting on late in the afternoon. We drove to the edge of this canyon, started glassing, saw a couple of does here and a couple of does there and a little bitty buck here, and then just continued on down that road down into the bottom of the canyon. We got down in the bottom of the canyon, and Travis was sitting on the left side of the vehicle, and I was over on the right side, and we had just gotten out of the vehicle to start glassing when Travis blurted out, he said, kill that deer up there on the hillside, kill him now. And so, man, I grabbed my rifle, loaded it around, and got a solid rest where I could, against a little old bush there that worked as a solid rest, and found this deer, and sure enough, there he was. He was about 300 yards away. One of his right antler was kind of hidden behind a little bit of brush, but his left antler I could see, and he was massive, had at least a brow tine, 2 points up, and a main beam. So, man, I assumed he had to be at least an 8-point. Didn't know about the other side, but I could see a little bit of that had a brow and a main beam, and I thought, oh man, he is big. Got that rifle settled down, and knowing that I had sighted it in at had it set for a little over 200 yards, zero, and a quick look through my binoculars, my rangefinder binoculars, my stealth vision binoculars, I knew that deer was shy of 300 yards away, like 270 yards. So not only did I hold appropriately, I held about the middle part of the body, squeezed off the shot, and as soon as I did, I heard Travis say, he's hit, and the deer got behind that bush that I could not see his right antler on, and so I'd bolted in another one, and I'd looked down, and I saw Travis. He had sat down, got a good solid rest, and he says, I can see him, and I said, Travis, if you got a shot at him, I know I hit him with that shot, please put him down. We don't want this deer to suffer. We don't want him to get away. Seconds later, Travis shot, and the deer went down. At that point, we knew that it was a pretty darn good kind of deer, but had no earthly idea what it was for sure. But could tell it had a decent sized neck and was certainly mature. So we kind of hem and hawed around a little bit while we sat there and watched Zerto and Alonzo crawl up this almost vertical cliff to get to where this buck was, and then found a way to bring it down. And about halfway down, we heard Alonzo say, he said, he's broken. And we thought, man, what do you mean he's broken? It didn't look like there was anything broken off that we could tell when I'd shot. But about 5, 6, 8 minutes later, they had him down at the bottom, and we walked up to him, and sure enough, this buck had 4 great points on the left side. On the right side, he had a brow tine, a main beam, and then a palmated area that looked about the size of my hand, where you could see there had been 4 total points, including the main beam as well too. But at that point, I did not care. This was an absolutely fantastic hunt, fantastic animal to take. Once I finally, later on that evening, pulled the cape off of it when we were taking care of the meat and the cape, realized that this deer was at least 8 years old. So truly a mature buck, and one that would probably done a lot of breeding in the past in the area where he was, and not only that, the beauty of it is it was such a great hunt in so many different ways, and came down to the wire, which makes for great stories. Normally I would have gladly taken one on the first or second day if I'd have found the right buck, but I just kept looking, and again, I'd shot several Coues deer, so a little bit on the picky side. But one of the good things about it is we were admiring the buck and taking photographs and getting ready for the long journey back to the camp, because we were almost 2 hours by road back to main camp. Travis said, "Hey," he said, you know what?" He said, I shot a little video of this buck the day that I saw him. And he said, it's not really the clearest, but he said, you can see that buck was fully intact. And he said, you can see how long those tines were and all those kind of things. And he said, Larry, you might even consider having the taxidermist put those back. He says, I'll send you a picture, and you can send it to taxidermist. They're the guys with double nickel taxidermy there in between San Marcos and New Braunfels, Texas, who do all my work and do unbelievably fantastic jobs, including I found out that they do great point replacement and main beam replacement. So armed with a photo that I will be sending them as soon as they start working on my animal, on my deer, we'll replace those tines. Now, that's something I normally don't do, but to me, this buck is just such a unique buck in so many different ways, and all the circumstances involved with the taking of him and the people I was with, and oh my gosh, just can't say enough good things about that El Durangueno Ranch. I'm going back, and hopefully maybe you'll join me. I'll tell you about how to do that here in a little while, but I'm going to have that buck repaired and can't wait to get him put on my wall. All that said is, before we left, I talked to Alonzo, the owner, and said, hey, I'd like to come back and very likely bring a small group of select hunters to come back. These will be 7-day hunts, and the beauty of it is there's a direct flight from DFW there at Dallas-Fort Worth directly into Durango and back again. So it's not like you have to change planes numerous times, such as sometimes the case going to other places in Mexico. But I'm going to go back again this coming year in 2026. Now, it'll probably be that last week of December. I'll take that back. It will be the last week of January. The rut when we were there, which was like the third week, tail end of the third week going into the fourth, the rut had just gotten started, and some of the older bucks were really starting to show up more and more every day. Now, I will tell you that we had found the ranch hand had found a buck that I hunted for a couple of days, including my staying out all day and watching not only the hillsides, but also watching a remote water hole. And unfortunately, the buck did not come in the day that I was there, but the ranch hands know deer, and they told me that this buck had 10 typical points. It was probably about 17 or 18 inch outside, which is a wide Coues deer, and was extremely massive with long points, and no doubt it would easily score in that 115 to maybe 125 as a just a typical Coues Whitetail. So that's one that I want to go back for and look and spend a little bit more time. I know that he wasn't taken. There were only 2 other deer taken after we left, and both those were really nice, older, mature 8 points. Those hunters were there just as the rut really kicked off, and from their description of what they saw, it was just phenomenal, the number of mature bucks that they saw. So no doubt I am going to go back. It'll be a 7-day hunt toward the tail end of January 2026. Now, if you want to learn more about that hunt, let me suggest that you go to my Facebook page, which is Larry Weissoon, and just send me a personal message, if you will, and I'll try to fill you in a little bit more about the hunt and the cost and all those other things, and maybe answer any kind of questions that you might have about hunting there. Might even go, I love hunting. There's several species I enjoy hunting and I keep going back to, and I'm kicking myself now for having missed several years of not hunting the Coues Whitetail down in Mexico, so I'm going to try to start making up for it there's a good chance I may go on a second hunt as well too. Now, realize also you can, if you so desire, shoot a second deer if they're available. The Alonzo and his crew do a fabulous job as far as wildlife conservation management programs are concerned, and they limit what they hunt and the numbers that they hunt, and to a great extent the age classes that they go after. So they want you to take the very possibly largest deer that you can that is a good mature buck. So, but there are some times to where there might be a second permit available, and so you can actually on one hunt, if you so desire, shoot two really nice Coues deer, or great Coues deer. And two, we've been visiting a little bit about some of the management program that they've going on, and we did see a number of older mature deer that were big 6 points, big 7 points that probably were 8-9 years of age and have done everything they're supposed to do, and there's no reason that some of those bucks should not also be taken. So there may be a chance to shoot a really good mature buck and also then a management buck that the guide suggests to you. These guides, even though they don't all speak English, there's great communication between the hunter and the guide. And going back to say, hey, the facilities are out of this world good. The food is just phenomenal. The numbers of animals, the everything about that hunt is just very top of the line. And I can't say enough good things about it. Recently wrote an article for DSC's Game Trails, and you should be able to see that probably either in the winter or spring edition of DSC's Game Trails if you're a DSC member. And if you're not, you really need to be. Greatest hunting organization there is in the world when you get right down to it. Staffed by mostly volunteers. So what money comes in goes right back out to wildlife conservation. I'm working with trying to get a donation on a Coues deer hunt as well too for our upcoming DSC Gala, which will be July 17th through 19th there at the Gaylord Hotel and Center in Grapevine, just outside of Dallas, if you will. Then that'd be a great place to spend some time as well too, and be around like-minded people, and you're going to find some of the best people in the world there at that DSC Foundation event. And you can learn more about that too by going to dscf.org. That's the DSC Foundation, dscf.org, and I'll be telling you more about that upcoming event as well too. But like I say, if you decide you'd like to go to on an unbelievably fabulous Coues deer hunt, a hunt of a lifetime when you get right down to it, if you'll go to my Facebook page and private message me there, particularly that way, I will do my best to respond to you in a timely manner. With all that said, I've got one little hunt coming up left. This is being recorded here in the kind of the middle part of February while I'm stuck in the house with this lung infection balloted thing, and got one more hunt coming up right before the tail end of our season here in Texas, the MLD season, which ends on the 28th of February, and so probably be after that you hear this, but I'll tell you more about those late season hunts on another podcast episode. In the meantime, I'm lining up a bunch of fabulous guests for upcoming episodes here, and really want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who listens to us, and please tell other people about us. This is a fun thing that I get to do, and I love sharing stories with you and sharing stories with my guests, and just want to tell you how much I truly, truly appreciate you having joined us on this particular episode, and that you'll join us on all the upcoming episodes as well too. Remember, we're weekly, and if you can't find us anywhere else, you can always go to my LarryWeissHun.net. That's LarryWeissHun.net. Of course, we're on Spotify and Apple and Carbon TV and OutdoorAction.com and WaypointTV.com. So a lot of opportunities to join us, and if you get a chance, go to those particular places and rate us if you think we're worthwhile listening to. So thank y'all very much again. Look forward to seeing y'all right back here again next week.
DSC's Campfires has also been brought to you by the Crown Bar in LaGrange, Texas, Texas Wildlife Association, Habit, Our Gear, Your Adventure, Double Nickel Taxidermy, and Burnham Brothers Game Calls.